Welcome one and all. Hello and welcome to the Reset Show, episode number 14. Today's topic is Agile at Work. And boy, have we got a special guest for you. Have we, Justin? Yes, we do. We do. Our special guest is Natal Dank, who quite literally wrote the book. The book in question being Agile HR, which she co-wrote with her colleague Rena Hellstrom and was published only last November in the UK and in the US by Kogan Page. Before we get chatting to Natal properly, some thank yous as always from me. Initially to my co-hosts, Emma Bridger from People Lab and Belinda Ganaway from Fathom XP. And of course, a shout out to our erstwhile producer, Katie Austin, who is there making sure everything runs smoothly. And thanks to our live studio audience who have joined us. You will get an opportunity to chat with Natal and respond to the somewhat rambling, random direction of the conversation, as is our wont. So we look forward to hearing from you all later on. And finally, thank you, of course, to our viewers and listeners, whether you're watching us on YouTube or listening to the podcast. Welcome, welcome, one and all. A few Natal facts to wet your whistle for the conversation. So Natal heads up learning, coaching, and community at PXO Culture and is seen by those who know, and some of you will be those who know, as a pioneer in the Agile HR movement. In 2016, Natal hosted the first Agile HR meetup in London, which has since mushroomed into a marvelous event that takes place across the world, from Sydney to Paris and online. And now, to bring you up to speed through PXO Culture, Natal is focusing on defining modern HR for the 21st century from her base in Bonnie, Scotland, where she joins us today. So that's all I'm going to say about Natal. Without further ado, Emma Bridger, tell us a little bit about the Reset Show and why we're here.
Cool, thanks Justin. Hello everybody. Gonna just give a quick intro to the Reset Show. Some of you have heard this before, but just in case you haven't, and we are getting lots of new listeners, so welcome if you're new. The Reset Show was originally put together to bring together like-minded people in our wonderful network to figure out how we can use this opportunity of the pandemic to do things differently and essentially make the world of work better. So, you know, whilst it's definitely been tough, difficult, you know, affected all of us in different ways, at the same time, we recognised there was an opportunity to to find some silver linings in there. So that's why we set up the Reset Show initially, and can't believe this is show number 14 already. Really looking forward to hearing Natal speak today. I'm really interested in this idea of modernising HR because it definitely needs it. But just before I pass over to B to get stuck into the questions, I am just going to give a quick plug to a book, a very exciting book that Belinda and I have co-written that's coming out next week. And we're having a special kind of one-off in between Reset Show, because Reset Show normally is every other week. So we're having a special one-off show next Wednesday that Justin's going to kindly host for us, where Belinda and I, joined by some of our contributors, to talk about employee experience by design. So if you're interested, come along. We'd love to have you there. So I had to just give that a quick plug, obviously. So without further ado, over to B.
Thank you. Yeah, super excited about the book launch, and we've also really enjoyed reading Natal's book over the last few weeks as well. So we are really, really interested in the whole world of Agile and Agile HR, and particularly in how it links to design thinking, and through that world of design thinking into what we like to talk about in terms of employee experience design. I loved your definition about how it enables you, how Agile enables you to work with people rather than on people. Again, I think that's a really good link into kind of the world of design thinking. But before we get into the detail of your book and into Agile HR, is there anything, Natal, that we haven't said about you already that we really should know?
Well, there's two ways we could go with that. One is we now know I'm in Scotland, but I am an Aussie that lives in Scotland, which is a fairly rare thing. I have one of the rescue dogs is now next to me. So 2 old rescue dogs lives in the house. And my partner and I also live with a 91-year-old. So that's always a little bit different as well. and we all coexist in lockdown. So that's a little bit different. I suppose one thing to add to the bio is I was HR for many, many years, in-house HR. So while I was seen as this pioneer in Agile HR, it comes from a long history of working in quite senior HR roles. And I often talk about the moment of when I started to question things and also sort of sent me in a new direction was using a 25 box matrix to assess talent because you can never have too many boxes. And if we think about designing great solutions for employee experience and delighting our internal customer, which I imagine your book is looking at quite a lot. Yeah, how do we let go of these, boxes and processes and systems and start designing user-friendly solutions that really enrich the employee experience? So, so that's definitely what kind of started me on this journey.
Fabulous, thank you. And I've got a great picture of your very mixed and very picturesque household as well. So I know that you talk about how you stumbled across Agile to a certain extent, where you're in a startup, but how you're already looking for better ways to create a more human experience at work, and how you introduced to Agile there. So I'm wondering, how was it explained to you, and what made it easy to grasp?
Well, it wasn't actually explained to me. It was, I was challenged. So I left this sort of senior in-house role with the 25 box matrix, and I went looking for, how do I go back to building a great place to work? Why am I in this HR role? What am I trying to achieve with it? And I've always loved the people side of business, and this is what sort of always got me so passionate. So I went looking for that and kind of stumbled into it in the sense that, yes, being asked to work for a startup, Agile was already alive in this organization. It was kind of one of the reasons why it was so successful. So by then it was a pretty successful startup. And what was interesting is I got asked to come in and help them redesign performance and reward, particularly for their fully agile part of the business. So we're talking tech teams running full agile, and have been doing it for a number of years. And up until then, I still thought agile was very tech. I thought it was very much all about software development and didn't really have much to do with HR. And what was interesting is I did what we often do in HR, which is I went and looked at the engagement survey. I then interviewed a few people. I then went and looked at what the best practice was in the industry, and also went and looked at what some of the big people do, like your Google and your Facebook. And then I designed my gorgeous blueprint of what they should do with their performance and reward. And it was cutting edge. Like I was going for it. I was delinking performance and reward ratings. I was really going to go for it.
Yeah.
And quite rightly, the head of IT, my main sponsor, said, well, how do you know it's going to work? And I went, oh, well, HR best practice. And he goes, oh, I don't like that term. And I went, oh my God, that's what I've used for so many years. And he said, well, in my area of the business, we test this, we experiment, and we get data, and we use data to drive the decisions. And you need to do the same thing. And at first I was like, oh, experiment, test, but this is people. And but then once you're into it, you start to realize, no, this is product development. This is service development. This is design, like what you guys have just been writing about. And if you want to delight your internal customer, then an agile mindset is just so key to that. But it was really interesting because I did this project for almost a year in the end, but after about 6 months, we had some great data to make quite big decisions around actually removing quarterly bonuses and all, quite big changes to how people were rewarded. But it was based on direct feedback of what worked and what didn't. And what was really interesting, at one stage, I gave some of the teams this tech solution to give each other feedback. And I thought, oh, well, they are techies, and they're young, all these assumptions, they'll love it. They hated it. And they said, well, we don't want a feedback tech solution. We want to have a psychological safe place to give each other feedback. We don't want it to be about the money and the ratings. We want it to be about our actual careers. And so a lot of the things that we hear, but this gave us actual data to use. And so we did that, and we made some big changes. And then when I left, I reflected back on it and I went, oh, I'm going to call that Agile HR, because that was using an Agile approach for designing HR. this is where business is going. We've got to get our head around this. We've got to redesign people practices to enable this. And this is why the startup was so successful. But the other key thing, and you touched on this in your intro, was this idea of you co-created the solution. And so by the time we got to these big announcements about redesigning reward, yeah, there was still debates, but everyone was in the change with you and you were doing it together. And for me, this was so powerful. How do you co-create change, as you said, rather than implementing it onto people? So the concept of change management is just, redesigned. And I just went, this is it. I think this could give us a lot of the answers that we're looking for.
So it's very much a kind of a learning by doing, as opposed to learning by being told.
Definitely.
Which is so agile.
Which is very agile. Yeah, exactly. And I would say that time and time again. Yeah, it is. You can talk about agile a lot and you can kind of think about how to approach it, but you've just got to give it a go. And I think particularly in the world of HR, you've got to just get in there and see how is it going to work for you? But in saying that, and we're probably jumping ahead a little bit, don't get too caught up in the one method or the one way of doing it, because in the end, it is much more a mindset. And then you go and find the tools that are going to work for you in your own context. And I think that's the best way to look at it.
I love that. Thank you. I first came across Agile several years ago. I was working in a digital transformation space, looking at the sort of the culture pieces, and Agile was bandied around a lot. And there was a lot of, snobbery is not quite the right word. There was a lot of preciousness about it and sniffiness, and people being accused of being agile-ish or not agile enough, or it was just all not terribly helpful. Yes. But for those not in the know already, is there anything else that you can tell us simply about Agile that will help land it for everybody, what it actually is?
For sure. And I think feeding off what you've just said, this is now the danger of the topic, isn't it? It's kind of, people maybe had a bad experience with it, didn't really get a chance to fully embrace it, or it seemed too elitist or too techie. But all around us, we're all talking about this need for business agility. So what's going on? What's in this? And how do we make it something about contemporary ways of working and just working better, rather than just always caught up in this word agile? So I think a great way to think about agile is firstly where it comes from, and then how do we translate it into our world of HR? So it does come from the world of tech, but it came from this need to respond to the complexity in which we now operate. So if you want to design a customer product, solution, service that is actually going to deliver value, and you want to validate that right from the word go and know that you're on the right track, because everything constantly changes around you, then you need to work in a different way. So this old way of kind of planning everything up front and then, working through your Gantt chart and implementing something 6 months, a year later, just isn't going to work as our world starts to change around us. So this started happening in tech, and then what's happening, and I think my quote at the moment is, there's nothing like a pandemic to demonstrate the value of working agile. So our world is transforming, it is insane. Each day you might actually need to respond to a change or some kind of complexity. And agile is about helping you solve complex problems. So it's not the answer, it's a way of finding answers. And what it says put your customer at the heart of what you do, and then look at how do you deliver value to that customer incrementally. So this is slice by slice, piece by piece. And what it says is use a feedback loop. So get something of value to this customer. It might be a bit smaller to begin with. It might not be the whole solution, or it might even be an experiment or a test. But get it to your customer, get feedback. Does this work? Does this not? And then use that feedback to drive the next piece of work. And this means there's a real discipline in how you actually approach it, but it means you can adapt. So after that cycle of work, you can adapt and you can go in a new direction based on the customer feedback, or you're validated that you're actually going in the right direction, and you keep moving ahead. And so it's a way of releasing value early and often. And we're now seeing this, move across whole industries, because business is craving an ability to innovate and respond very rapidly to what's going on around them. And Agile gives that. The problem, however, is often it gets related to the methods that sit behind it, which is Scrum and Kanban, and people get a bit fearful of that. But first and foremost, it is that mindset.
Mm.
And I'd probably just add one other thing that I think starts to transform how we see it in HR. So if you take that mindset into HR, it's then all about our people, because our people are our customer, and how are we delivering value to our people? So if you take a big complex problem like well-being in the years of the TAMP, or the future of work, we're all talking about how do we design the future of work? This is huge. It's massive. It's so complex. So how do we break it down? How do we make it very tangible? How do we focus on what we're going to deliver week on week, month on month? How do we validate? How we use, design thinking? What's the problem we're trying to solve? How do we build the solution? How do we prototype and test? So it starts to transform how we do HR, because we start to actually incrementally deliver this value rather than this big bang, one size fits all change, which we've done up until now. It also means that we design processes that are going to help people get their work done, which is great. But also, Agile said, actually, the way we used to work in the more waterfall way, the kind of more traditional way, is that we would hand everything over to the next person. So your Gantt chart was usually handing over to the next person. And Agile says that's way too slow. You've got to get everyone you need in the team together, and you need to help them self-organize and just get them to get the job done. And this transforms HR, because if you start to design solutions with a multi-skilled team rather than single topic owners, it's really amazing. And if you think about, I don't know about you, but I used to be the head of talent or the head of learning or the head of, someone would be reward, someone with recruitment, but we always had to involve each other in our projects to get it done.
Yeah.
So this is, what's the main problem? What do we need to solve for the business? Now let's all work together and get the job done.
Thank you. I think that brings it to life so well. I particularly I think that was really landed for me, since I've sort of engaged with your work, is this idea of slices of work, and in the releasing value early and often, but the slices of project was a bit that I was sort of missing, I think, when I'd had it explained when I was sort of bumping into Agile previously. So I found that really useful. I'm going to ask you one more question, and then I'll hand back to Justin and Emma to sort of surface some questions from everybody who's on the call. But the other question for me is, what's the most unexpected benefit that you've discovered of taking a more agile approach in HR?
Well, I think if we feed off what you've just said, this slices of value, and it's the defining value. So we often talk about wanting a seat at the table in HR, or wanting to be seen as a true business partner, or we really want to be seen as value adding, but we're often we're doing people things, and people don't necessarily understand the value that we deliver. This really helps us define and articulate value, and then demonstrate what we're doing through data. And for me, that's just such a powerful way of working for HR. But it's also the same way and the same language that the business is using. So it's not like this is a special way of how we're going to do our projects. It's actually, how do you know that you're delivering value to your end customer and your product or your service is successful? We're going to use the same techniques internally to ensure that we're delivering value. And it means that we can prioritize our work in such a better way. So, I mentioned earlier, we have these huge complex problems that we need to solve. Often our strategy is full of big things like design leaders for the future of roles that we don't know about yet, well-being, personal growth, all these really big issues. But also we have loads of business as usual. So what should we focus on, and when should we do it, and how do we spend our time? And Agile is all about understanding your capacity, constantly prioritizing your work, and defining what you're going to do through value. And so I think this idea of value delivery is really powerful for HR.
Fabulous. Thank you. Emma.
Yeah, wow. Thanks, Natal. That's amazing already. My head's spinning. Got lots of thoughts and questions and ideas. Where I'm going to go to first is absolutely, completely on board with everything you said. It's kind of a comment, and I'd love your take on this. So absolutely with you that we need to, as you say, take slices, test it, figure out what's landing. My background is psychologist, research psychologist, so I'm all over that. How do we make sure we ask the right questions? So you've got a great example that you shared at the beginning around the performance development, performance management, right? So we know the science. The science tells us that, up to a certain level, money makes a difference. After that, it doesn't make a difference, right? But you ask most people, what's the most important thing for you at work, or where'd you come to it? People go, oh, it's the pay, right? So we never ask those sorts of questions. We ask different types of questions. We ask very strength-based questions, like, tell me about a time when you loved what you were doing, to unearth the real insight. How do you make sure, because I can see a scenario where well-meaning HR teams are going, great, we need to get some feedback, but they're asking the wrong questions, and then they're getting the answers, they're taking them down a completely different path. Does that make sense? And have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, totally. Well, for me, that's moving beyond the survey, isn't it? And the standard interview questions. So I think there's a couple of layers to kind of unpick that. And one is, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? So the performance and reward situation is a classic one. So, oh, we'd like to redesign our performance and reward. Okay, great. And we go straight into the process of performance and reward, and we're redesigning it without going, well, why is it wrong? Like, what's wrong here? Why do we even do performance? Like, what is a performance management system? What are we trying to achieve with it? What is the business problem? And we need to frame it in business language. So is it that people don't find it useful? Does it get in the way? Is it not adding value? Is it focused on the wrong things? Is it that we're incentivizing the wrong behaviors? So what is the actual problem? And I always say there's no use embracing Agile if you don't know what the problem is that you're trying to solve. So that's definitely first and foremost. So I would want to interrogate that. And this is when I would then move into design thinking. So I think for me, design thinking, is just so interlinked with Agile. And this is often where I think HR gets tripped up. So it's really interesting. I work with a lot of HR teams, and we go to set up their first, Agile project, and we start the project. And of course, once you're getting into the nitty gritty of, all right, what's on your backlog? What are you going to deliver, and why? What's the data? Pretty quickly they go, what is it that we're trying to do here? What is the problem? And there's often all this discovery work that we haven't done in HR. And this is things like employee experience mapping, empathy interviews, really interrogating the problem before we go anywhere near any kind of solution design. And so for a lot of our issues, we actually need to do, I always advocate a design sprint up front. Anything from well-being to performance or reward. Well, what is the problem? And also what's the prioritized in these problems? So you might go and start interrogating something like well-being, and you'll have a whole series of issues that it will come out. But what's the most important thing to solve for your business first, and why? Because we only have so much capacity. And why are we going after that? How do we articulate that to the business? But also, how do we validate that with the business, that this is the right thing to solve first? So I often talk about solving real problems with real people, and also understanding pain points. So, what are the pain points? What are the moments that matter? That you can really, if you get those moments right, you'll truly engage people, you'll make their job so much easier, and they'll deliver great value to the end customer. If you get that moment wrong, then you lose them. So this is where I think a lot of that concept of actual product design starts to come into the idea of Agile. And I would say this is where HR, we've had such great intentions, we love people, we want to solve, we want to build great people solutions, but we have a lot of assumptions about what would work because we did it somewhere else before and we saw it work well. Or because we're in it all the time, we kind of go, oh yeah, this is what we need to work on, or this is the solution. Or as you said, we ask the wrong questions. Are you happy with your pay? No. Who's happy with their pay?
Absolutely, yeah.
Exactly. So I think this is actually learning new skills in HR, and this is where we can really start to pull on skills from marketing, skills of product design, skills from actual even tech, all of those. And this is where the HR skill set starts to build out, and that's what I'm definitely seeing with Agile coming into HR, developing the skill set and moving us beyond what we might have, the traditional practitioner, I suppose. Yeah.
Thanks for that. I completely, again, on board with all of that. And like you say, I mean, in our experience, definitely, I think, so much of the value of the work we do is helping people to figure out what it is they're trying to solve straight up. And I sort of say, once you've got that, the rest is easy, right? It's that bit.
Totally.
And we have exactly the same. I mean, the world of work that we're in, engagement and experience, so often it's kind of like, oh, I want to do something with well-being. It's like, well, what do we actually mean by that? And it's like, but it's interesting because I think there are those companies who are up for really investing in that discovery process, and they're going to get somewhere and make some progress, and those that go, no, we've already done that, here's a little bit of survey data, just use that, so
exactly. So you've got to, I think we've got to challenge thinking, but I also think you don't necessarily have to do, like, it can be quick and dirty, as well as investing, all this time and effort in a nice, great discovery design sprint. So your quick and dirty is walking down the corridor, when we were in corridors, and sitting on a Zoom call and putting something up like this and saying, if I sent this out tomorrow as an email, how would you react? There was one where, they're looking at career development, and what was really interesting with this one is they discovered that career development meant all kinds of things to people. Once you started to tap into the language, it didn't mean competencies. It didn't mean feedback skills and training programs. It often meant relationships with people in my team, wanting to connect with someone that was more experienced in something, but and often didn't mean the next job. It was the environment that they worked in. So first of all, they uncovered all these things around what actually people thought about career development. But then once they were in the solution design, one of the main ideas that started to come out with this was this kind of internal LinkedIn kind of product. And but before they went anywhere near even mocking up a tech solution, they created a cardboard version of website pages that they went, all right, let's go and put this now back in front of some users and see, would they want to click on the email because it was a topic that they would find would help them solve a problem? Would they now click on this? Would they now click on that? And so you're, really cheap and easy way of testing an idea before you go anywhere near putting any time and money into it. So I think it's also, HR's been quite caught up in the shiny and the new for a while. And we often feel that we need things to look fantastic before we release them out. But what is fantastic? Fantastic is that people engage with it and find it useful. I don't know, but I imagine there's a few people on this call that, I designed beautiful performance management systems in the past and learned leadership programs. But sometimes I then spend a couple of years trying to get everyone to really engage with them and say things like, oh, it's not the system, it's the conversation that you have around the system, and yeah, I know that feels a bit weird to fill in that form, but it will help you, get your career development. And no, why didn't I start with the user experience first? So it's a flipping of the mindset, and it will just take a bit of time, I think, for HR to get comfortable with that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Sorry, Justin. Yeah, it goes Justin now, aren't we?
Well. Do you know the English expression Gordon Bennett? It's sort of, it's like, that's a lot. Natal, thank you so much. This is, as always, sparking so many potential tangential conversations. Just briefly, I love what you're talking about, the cardboard box. That reminds me of a previous guest we had. You probably know Carly Love, a prototyping expert who talks about this term, Wizard of Oz prototyping, that's such a lovely example of that. Well, let's just build a version of it and try it out.
Exactly.
I love that. So quite often, these conversations, we have two strands running through them, and one strand is the organizational strand, if you like. So how does the topic that we're talking about relate to organizations? And I'm always interested in how does the topic relate to us as individuals as well. So I'm interested in what thoughts you might have about how Agile and all of the associated principles can apply to someone who is just a person and doesn't necessarily work in HR or comms or any of those areas. So just us all as individuals, what can we learn from Agile?
Yeah, sure. For all just the people out there.
That's me.
Well, I'm very into the personal Kanban at the moment, right? So this is what I advocate, and it's I think it's particularly useful in times of lockdown and pandemic, shall we say, where we might be overwhelmed with what's happening in our lives. So and there's a good writer, he's Oliver Berkman, writes quite a few great little articles and books, and he drew on it. But there is actually a book out there, Personal Kanban, and for the life of me I can't remember the actual authors, but they come a bit more from the traditional agile space. So Kanban it's actually been around for a long time, but it's sort of been taken on by Agile. And it's this way of managing your workflow. So the idea is that you should see all your workflow at the same time. And it has these simple columns, backlog, to do, doing, done. And you aim to move your work across the board. And that could be as simple as, little tickets or little, headings going across the board. What's interesting about Kanban is that the focus is work in progress. So what you should try and do is challenge you, say, okay, I think I should only ever have 5 things work in progress. And the idea is that you can't bring something new in unless you've got something done. And what I find really interesting is that if you create a personal Kanban, which is things you're trying to get done work-wise, things you're trying to get done in the house, what you've got to do for the kids and the dogs and the 91-year-old and all of these things, is that there's rarely, you can't get through very much. And there's all the, I've got mine here, and I put way too much in my doing column already. And there's quite a few sitting in my waiting blocked. And so it's really interesting. So but what it helps is, first of all, add this sense of achievement. If you get something done, it's like, yeah, well, today I did do this, all this other stuff didn't go successful, but I did do this. But also it's this visualization of work. And so we were talking about this earlier with the HR team. There's so much work going on, and often we don't even understand half the stuff that our colleagues doing and what our team is on. So the more we can unearth everything and visualize it, the more we can feel like a little bit of a sense of control. Okay, this is all the work, and actually start to talk about true capacity. And in a personal situation, that's really quite a strong thing. So I found that, on my Kanban, I'll have something, like cut the grass, as well as, read the latest great employee design book that's just been given to me, as well as, get this piece of work done. And I'm often not going to get the cut the grass is not going to happen this weekend, and I want to get to all these books, but I haven't. But actually just having them up there and knowing that I've tried to think about doing it, it makes you feel better. And then you start realizing, well, I'm trying to focus on the most important things for me personally to get done. Do I need to rearrange that a little bit? And it is a much more useful tool rather than your traditional to-do list. And so I would say personal Kanban is a great technique that actually helps you yourself. And as I said, Oliver Berkman and a few others have written about it, and I can send a link out later.
Brilliant.
Oh, well, that's lovely, isn't it? I'm glad I asked you that question. Thank you. Yeah, I just can see behind Belinda's head there might be some sort of system already in place.
Exactly. Personal Kanban.
There's no system there, believe me. I'm definitely going to try. Just
looks very organized. That's lovely. Thank you. And Katie will be doing some research, Natal, into who wrote the book and sending out links. We send out a package to everyone who's subscribed.
I will send you some links, Katie.
Yeah, that would be great. So that's another plug to anyone who isn't subscribed. If you subscribe, of course, you get all of this extra resource. Natal, thank you. We're going to move to one of our audience guests' questions. Now, this is a slightly unusual one because one of our regular guests can't be with us today, Debbie, and she was so excited to be part of the call that she actually sent us the questions and said, would you mind asking Natal, because I can't be on the call. So Katie, I think you have a copy of the questions. If you'd like to read them out for Natal, that would be great. And then if anyone else, of course, who's on the call has questions for Natal, now's the time to pop them in the chat. So Katie.
No problem at all. Yes, we've actually got 2 questions. So the first one is, are there any particular HR processes that lend themselves particularly well to agile practices, especially if an organization is cynical or resistant to change? Where in the employee life cycle does it tend to be most easy and effective to implement agile ways of working and user-centered design?
Okay, all right. So we had processes, but also where in the employee life cycle. So I'll just kind of break those two down. And we also had cynical, I like that, cynical organization. So should we say, an organization that perhaps isn't open to agile at the moment. Yeah, okay. So, well, I think I need to attack the concept of cynical as well. So, okay, all right. So I think first and foremost, before we jump to where in HR, is going back to this idea of the cynical organization or someone that's not quite open to the concept of agile. And this is where I would talk about the problem that you're trying to solve. So what is the business problem? And also how's this impacting the end customer of the business? So is it problems with net promoter score or, people not able to get their work done to deliver value to the end customer? So look at whatever you're doing as a business problem and actually define it in that way and talk about the value that you could deliver by solving the business problem. So I often get HR teams to think about three levels, the employee value, so the value that's going to go through to the employee, but then the value to the business bottom line and the value to the end customer. And we don't always think about those other two, but everything that you're doing needs to link through to those three areas. So that would be my first one, is actually to get around the cynicism or this kind of idea of resistance. Just don't worry about talking about agile for now and just go and talk about solving business problems. And then we're going to use a way of working that's going to help us solve this problem. And I'm actually going to do it in a data-driven way. And generally, senior stakeholders or resistors really kind of like that kind of language. Okay, yeah, well, oh yeah, I've got that problem. Yep, I want to see some data on how we could solve that. And that's also quite important because linking back to what Emma said earlier, there's also a lot of assumptions or ways that we go about solving problems that you've often got to get over. So, so to get kind of put that, okay, we're going after data, we're going to solve this problem. Then if we think about, so there's two ways you can approach it. One, you can say, all right, we're going to go and solve a business problem that's important for the business. So it has a bit of meat to it. You maybe don't go after the one that's like leadership development because, or the CEO and everyone's going to be involved, but you go after management development because, that's going to really kind of deliver value and is something you can work at. But and often a good one is going after something where you've tried a few things in the traditional way and you're not getting anywhere with it. And actually, if you come at it now in a new way, you'll really show some value and that will get people excited. So that's without thinking about topics overall. If I then think about where within HR Agile lends itself, this is also where I think people get a bit confused with Agile. So Agile is awesome at solving complex problems and helping you innovate. So of course it's great for solution design. So everything from learning and development, talent development, redesigning a process, all of those things, Agile is just a natural fit. And I would say that, seeing great things happen when an L&D team embraces Agile and where it can go from there. Also, that if you think about that, that's very program based, and also we've done it in a certain way for a long time. So it's nice to kind of disrupt it. But then people say, oh, well, you can't use Agile in operations, or business as usual, because you got to kind of just get those tasks done. And what I would say is that you're not going to necessarily prototype and test your your PACE system. But if you ever want to update that system, then you should definitely go and do it in an Agile way to make sure whatever you're going to design works. But where Agile can help you in the kind of everyday processes is this concept of prioritization and visualization of work. So if you're an operations team, you still can embrace an Agile mindset, but you're using it in a slightly different way. So it's, what have I got on? Where am I focusing my time? How am I delighting my customer? How am I listening to the feedback of the, the service that we're providing and constantly improving? But how am I, you're not necessarily prototyping and testing everything you're doing. So there's a different way that you might pull on Agile. So that's what I would say. It's great for all parts of HR, but the way you embrace it might be a little bit different given what you're trying to do with it. And this is where what I think is, so this is where I start to talk about, and this is kind of what I'm focusing on now. So how do we move HR to being about people experience and operations, this holistic approach to your employee experience, managing a portfolio of services and products that go out across the business that is all about the employee life cycle joined up together? And how are we working with other parts of the business to have that end-to-end accountability or value stream? And if you take that kind of mindset, well, that's just a product agile mindset from word go. But parts of it will be very lean and about efficiency. You know, it's my operations. I want them to be fantastic and delivering great service. And other parts is going to be constantly about designing great solutions and iterating and prototyping and testing. So it's about mindset overall, and then seeing where it's going to add the most value and how. But around all of that, with that portfolio of products and services, it's what's the value we're delivering at any one time? Why are we doing what we're doing? What's the priority? And how do I measure that impact? And if we take those things as what being agile is, then I think we can relate it to every part of HR.
Thank you. That's brilliant. Thanks.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Was that the two questions? Did you say you had two questions, or were they combined?
I have got another. Another.
Go for it, Katie.
In terms of ceremonies, from your experience, which ones tend to resonate most with HR teams? So an example given here is, I'm assuming velocity tracking and burn down charts are a step too far, but daily stand-ups and retrospectives work well.
Well, I like a good velocity tracking actually, and a good burn down and up down chart. Perhaps that can come a little bit later once you're really into using it. But what I would say is that, so rather than rituals per se, it's good to think about cadence. And cadence is the rhythm that you're working in. And so traditionally, HR has worked, we used to have an annual cycle where we would, processes and systems would be done annually, and even things like review, feedback reviews, appraisals for another word, career development would be done on this annual kind of process. The business doesn't even operate very much annually anymore. So, but what Agile says is that actually we need to work on a different type of cadence. And so we've started to embrace more of a quarterly cadence in HR, but actually Agile says, let's go even further than that. So either, 1 weekly, 2 weekly, or monthly, you're actually going through a cycle of rituals. So you would do, what are we planning? What are we focusing on this cycle of work? So this month. What are we going after and why? What can we do and what can't we do based on our capacity? What's the value and what's the data we're going to track on what we're delivering? Is there something that we need to, solutions design? Do we need to do some design sprinting, or actually is it more delivery this month? These kind of things. So a good planning session. And if you notice, it's not planning for the whole year. You do have your kind of long-term vision and goals, but this is, what are we going to go after this month and why? Then as that progresses, you then get to, yes, the review and the retrospective. Now, the review is really interesting because that's actually demoing work to your customer or your business to get feedback. So this is so powerful. And I'm seeing HR teams transformed by doing this. And this is about, so I'm working with the team at the moment, and they've set out their strategy for the year. And now we're doing monthly review and retro sessions. And they're at the moment just demoing to each other. Well, we just designed this thing for well-being. This is how it went. And this is what the data was. And they're giving each other feedback. And they're like, oh my God, we've never inspected and adapted our work in this way. And then some HR teams are actually taking that to the next level. And on a regular basis, they go and demo the work with the business and say, all right, so we did this month. What did you think? What worked, what didn't? How do we keep improving this product? What do we now work on in the next month? Should it still be this product? Is it something else? Did we solve the problem? And this is interesting. Rather than just activity, it's about solving problems and getting data about impact. Then you go into the retrospective. So the review is about what, so the product that we're working on, and then the retrospective is how, and this is about how we're working as a team. And we all know that this is a very powerful thing to do, and we often never do it. Even in our personal life, this kind of reflection, this learning. So that in itself is also very powerful. But what I'm seeing in HR is you can use that quite strategically. So, you can have a strategic retrospective with your senior leadership team. You could also be linking that back to the people strategy as well. Okay, how are we working as an actual HR team? Are we structured in the right way? Are we getting the right results here? How do we start evolving our ways of working to do that? So for me, the cadence is the really important one. So you can have a few rituals in there, and definitely things like stand-ups are great, but they don't always work for HR. Like a daily stand-up often means you're working on the same thing a day in, day out. So I see a lot of HR teams either make that more of a kind of ops check-in. Hey, we're working on these things, or it's linked to a certain project, or maybe you don't do it as much during the week. So it might be a couple of times. So this is where I'm a massive advocate of evolving the toolbox of Agile for HR. So stand-ups are great, definitely short check-ins, not these big like ops meetings that we used to always have, but it's sticking to the cadence. And this is how it gives you discipline. So I did a meetup this morning, and we were talking about Agile HR for startups. And people always talk about, as a startup grows, how do you give enough structure to ensure that it can grow efficiently and effectively, but also hold on to that autonomy and self-organization that, that is about Agile and makes it so great. And it's the cadence of Agile. It's having discipline. And so it's very easy to do that one time, but to do that every month and actually listen to the feedback and take in an improvement each time, and so that sense of discipline around the planning and the reviewing actually gives you a lot of structure. And it means that Agile is not just about doing what you want. It's actually about having this sort of set way of working. And then definitely you could track your velocity and do a burn down or burn up chart. You could do both. And then that will give you a better insight into your capacity, but we can do that in another discussion.
Thank you so much. That's great.
Thank you, Natal. And as you've just said, we could do that in another discussion. This is where we quite often end up, because you open up this stuff, don't you? And it's like, we've got even more to talk about. But for what we have already talked about, thank you from us all. Really, really packed with practical tips. So I think anyone who's listening back to this or watching it again will be probably, like most of us, making frantic notes, whether you're coming from an organizational angle or a personal angle as well. Of course, we had the personal Kanban. I had a quick look, and I think it might be Jim Benson and Torian DeMaria who you were talking about. So we will be, I will certainly be checking them out. So lots of tips and advice, and also I think lots of additional avenues opening up for our listeners to explore and find out more about. So maybe we'll have you back for a part 2 sometime. That would be delightful. So Natal, thank you again. Wish you well. Hope the book continues to gather the momentum that it's already enjoying. And thanks, of course, your co-author, who isn't here with us today.
Thank you.
And a brief plug to finish the show for the coming up next on the Reset Show. So on Wednesday, the 10th of March, we resume our normal routine with Kerry Hughes and Paul Bailey from Spark. They'll be talking to us about human-centered design and how it applies to employee experience. We'll be looking particularly at customer experience and user experience. So that's coming up on the Reset Show. And of course, we have to finish with a final plug for Emma Bridger and Belinda Gandaway's book, which has recently been published, which you can join the official Zoom launch. So, this is one of the advantages of they would have,
and Agile HR as well.
And Agile HR.
Plug all the books.
Let's plug all the books.
A book off. Yeah.
So we look forward to that. That's on Wednesday, the 3rd of March at the slightly later time of 5 p.m. to encourage you to maybe join us with a little tipple of your choice, a cup of tea or a cup of something stronger, a wee dram, as they would say up in Scotland. That's it from us today. What a great conversation. Lots to think about, lots of inspiration for us all. Thank you, Natal. Thank you to our live audience who joined us, and thank you to all of you who are continuing to support us by subscribing and watching the show and listening to the podcast. We will see you hopefully next week, and then back here again on the 10th of March. So for now, thank you, go well, see you next time. Thanks, folks.